This story is about something that I went through basically daily in sixth grade. So that would be for me when I was 11, and this would be like 1981 to 1982. Sixth grade for a lot of us is middle school. So you start out in elementary school, and then you have middle school, sixth through eighth grade, and then you have high school. Other places do it a little bit differently in the U.S., but that's the way it was where I went to school. And for me, it was a massive transition because I went from going to a public elementary school in a very rural area, the Kettle Moraine School District, where, we had like one gifted, talented person who drove all around the entire school district, meeting with us like once or twice a month. And, a lot of my classes were in effect, hey, go to the library and do some projects, or there's some other smart kids, go do some things over there. And it was a transition from that public school where they actually wanted to move me ahead into seventh grade from fifth grade to a private school. And the private school that my parents found for me, which wasn't that far from our place, it was called University Lake School, and I was able to get a scholarship there on the basis of my test scores and who knows what else. My parents filled out the application, and it was the kind of private school where there were basically two kinds of people there as far as students go. There were students who were smart. There were students who were rich, from wealthy families. And these were anywhere from wealthy families to like the super rich. And, there wasn't an awful lot of mixing between the two. Those of us who were there on scholarship were made to know that we were there on scholarship. And as a matter of fact, most of the other kids who were there on scholarship, now that I think about it, who are my friends, they were like, kids of professors at UW-Milwaukee or Marquette University. And so it was kind of a strange place. There were some really great things about it. There were some really terrible things about it. And there was a lot in between. And it was very class conscious in ways that I'll tell you about in other stories. So in any case, one of the things that we had to do at University Lake School was chores after school had finished. And these chores could be all sorts of different things. They in effect were saving money by making us kids do extra work. Like in seventh grade, I actually got to pair up with my friend, Steve Utzereth, and we had to clean all the test tubes and beakers and stuff like that for the chemistry lab. I don't even remember what I did for eighth grade. It must have been something that, I wasn't very interested in. But in sixth grade, I must have drawn the short straw, or maybe they gave the kids who were there on scholarship the really crappy jobs to do, because what I was assigned was to vacuum the library. And the library was at one end of the main campus building. There were a couple different campus buildings, as I remember, and I think they've built on additional stuff since then. There was the main building where we had all our classes, and the cafeteria was adjoined to that. And, you went down this long, long hallway where there were classrooms and lockers with cubby holes. And we only had cubby holes in middle school. The high schoolers had lockers. And you'd go all the way down to the end, and that was the library. And it was a pretty big place. And then there was another building on campus that was there, and that's where the gymnasium was, and the locker rooms, and the music and art areas, and I think there were some other things in there as well. So in any case, every day after school ended, I was supposed to report to the library, and then get this antiquated vacuum cleaner that was pretty heavy, and lug it around and vacuum portions of the library. I didn't have to vacuum the whole thing every day, thank goodness. But I had to vacuum quite a bit, and it would take me, half an hour, 45 minutes, and then the carpool would pick us up afterwards. And I remember actually the people in the carpool sometimes giving me dirty looks because it would take me so long to get this job done. But it was one of the crappiest jobs on campus. And I think that the justification that they had was like, oh, this is character building for these kids. But I'm honestly convinced that it was just a way for them to avoid having to pay custodians to do the work that we were otherwise doing. And I kind of think it was a way to like remind us of our place as well. So, what I remember about the library there, I spent a good bit of time in it anyway because it was really a great library. It was kind of dark inside, but it was, it was like construction from the 1960s or 70s, so lots of dark wood paneling all over the place and, wooden beams and, the stacks of books. And I loved libraries already. When I was a kid, growing up in that region, it was a big treat for us to go to the Delafield Public Library. And that was a small library, but they had things like, I read my way through all the Tom Swift novels. And I remember reading about, all the different horror movie villains like the Wolfman. And I remember reading other stuff in there as well. And then we got, as a treat every once in a while, to go to the Waukesha Library, which is much, much larger than the little Delafield Library. And that's where I picked up a lot of the science fiction and fantasy books that I was reading when I was in, late elementary and then middle school and then high school. And so getting to like go through, I had to vacuum, right? And the vacuuming kind of sucked. But I'll talk about that in a minute. But one of the cool perks of working in the library, although not working for the library, was getting to see all the books that were on the stacks. And so I'd go back to them later on in the day when we'd have like a library pass or whatever and check them out. And I remember seeing the books that were out on display. There was one that was all about gnomes. It was kind of a big thing in the fantasy world at the time, all these illustrations. And so I'd, every once in a while, page through it. And there were other cool things about the library as well, things that were being put out. I'll mention one other thing, and then I'll actually get to talking about the work that was involved. So I was into wargaming when I was a kid. I don't know exactly where I came across it, but I bought from the Yaquinto Game Company a game, and I think it was just called War Game or something like that. And my dad and I used to play it together when he would have the time. And so I kind of picked up a taste for wargaming. And then one of my neighbors was also into that. So, I knew about Avalon Hill's Diplomacy. I never played it, but I'd heard about it because, you read books about wargaming and all that from the library again. And you're like, well, that sounds like a really cool game. For those who don't know, Diplomacy is a up to 7-player game. No dice. There's no chance involved in it. Very simple rules, but very complex gameplay. And it was a really, really kind of cool game at the time. So the high schoolers were playing it, and they would leave it out on a table. And you could see all these pieces, and you'd be like, wow, it looks like that country's doing pretty well, and that country's not. And so day by day by day, as they would make moves, I would get to see who was winning and who was losing. Never got to play it there. As a matter of fact, I've never actually had the chance to play it in... No, I did play it in college in person a few times. Mostly I've played it online. And so I was just like sort of looking at it from a distance thinking, man, it must be cool to be in those classes where you get to do wargaming, on the tabletop. So back to vacuuming, right? I would report in, and then I would get this vacuum cleaner, and it was like a heavy-duty thing from the probably like early 70s, heavy as hell. You had to lug it around. The cord had been duct taped a couple times. And it wasn't like the vacuum cleaner that we had at home, which wasn't like, state of the art, but was certainly in better shape. And a little bit of backstory, I knew how to vacuum, which is not a particularly hard, thing to do, but I think some people can't really do it effectively. I knew how to vacuum because as a kid, we all had chores. If you had a day off, you could be guaranteed there was 1 or 2 hours worth of chores like weeding or, cleaning the kitchen or sweeping out the garage and rearranging things. And vacuuming was one of those things that we learned to do quite early as kids. By the way, I think it's really good for kids to be brought up knowing how to do basic chores, so when they go out as adults, they're not only not a drag on their roommates, but they know how to do that. Every kid should learn how to iron. Every kid should learn how to cook basic things. Every kid should learn how to clean using products safely. Every kid should learn how to vacuum. And so we did. I did a lot of vacuuming. I'll also mention too that my Uncle John, he really changed character when he started having kids. Because before he and his wife, my Aunt Mary, started having kids, he was really kind of a jerk when it came to kids. He kind of subscribed to the children should be seen and not heard view, and he mellowed out once he had his own kids. And when you stayed at Uncle John's, you had to earn your keep. And so the way that I would typically earn my keep was by vacuuming. And Uncle John was a taskmaster. If you didn't vacuum the way he wanted it vacuumed, he would let you know. And you'd have to re-vacuum the whole area. So fortunately, by the time that I'm working in the library, I already know how to vacuum. I'm lugging this thing around, which is kind of a heavy-duty, old-fashioned vacuum cleaner. And, nobody really checked on me all that often. And the thing that I do remember about it that I kind of liked, it's the same sort of thing as when you mow the grass. You get those lines because you're moving around like in concentric circles. The library was so big that you would have to vacuum sections, right? And it had this super long cord, so you could actually go around quite a bit without having to unplug stuff. And so, you vacuum, this almost mindless activity, sort of like cutting the grass. You got to pay attention so you're not bumping anything and damaging stuff. But that's what I would do. And so, in a way it was kind of relaxing, but I also resented having to do it because I knew other kids had like easier jobs and were getting out of there quicker. And, it was dusty sometimes, and it was heavy enough that it kind of hurt to lug it around when you have to like carry it all the way up the stairs and then back down the stairs. And I remember that there'd be like a note left out for me, vacuum this section, vacuum this section. And so after a while it became kind of mindless monotony, and I'd think about other stuff. And I'd look around, at what was there in the library. Usually there wouldn't be anybody else. I was sort of on my own. I don't remember there being a librarian hanging out after hours. I remember turning out the light switches and closing up and putting the vacuum back in its closet after I was done, now that I'm thinking about it. So I was like totally on my own. And I did this pretty much every day. I did skip one day where I'd like had enough. I was kind of fed up with it. And the person who'd assigned the job to me was my 6th grade science teacher. He later became the headmaster of University Lake School. And I don't, honest to God, his name was Dick Butt. Richard Butt, right? So we all called him Mr. Butt. And he actually went by Dick. I've never understood why somebody would go by Dick rather than Richard, especially if they have such a suggestive name. And I remember being in science class, and he asked me if I'd vacuumed the day before, and I was thinking, oh shit, he knows I didn't. But I lied anyway, and I said, yeah, I did it. And then he said, I know that you didn't because there were some paper scraps on the floor that didn't get vacuumed up. Now you're going to have to, I'm going to have to punish you in some way. And I don't remember what the punishment was. Obviously, they couldn't make me vacuum anymore because I was already doing this stupid job for them 5 days a week anyway. So I think maybe I got a detention or something like that. So, I did this for however many days there are in a school year, from the beginning in August all the way to the end in May. In August and June, actually, I think it was kind of hot work because nothing was air conditioned. Everything was heated, of course, in the winter because this is the Midwest. it was kind of an interesting task looking back on it. It really wasn't that onerous of a task compared to all the many other things that I've done. And it's just vacuuming, right? I've been cleaning things my entire life as a kid, working in restaurants, when I was in the Army, every place that I've lived, I've done my own cleaning. So it's really not that big of a deal. But I remember, like it kind of stuck in my proverbial craw that I got landed with this task of vacuuming up the library. And it was a huge space for a kid. I imagine if I were to go back on campus, it probably wasn't that big of a space. But when you're 11 years old, the world looks very different to you. And then, like I mentioned, sixth grade was over. When I came back for seventh grade, I got assigned a different job that was kind of cush, getting to clean the lab equipment. I mean, you had to be a little bit careful about, chemicals in your skin and stuff like that. And so we had a briefing on like what to do if you spill something on yourself. But we got to do a lot of easy stuff when we got to get out of there. But that was my sixth grade. So in addition to having like a full school day, which included all these different subjects and sometimes art or music or gym class, and hanging out on this campus, I was stuck in that spot in the library, vacuuming up everybody else's messes, I guess. Some days it was worse, some days it was better, depending on what sort of projects people had been doing in there. But I'll close on this because I want this to be, somewhat positive. I could look back again, like cutting grass. I could look at the stuff that I'd done for the day and feel a sense of satisfaction. It wasn't really a Sisyphean task, the guy rolling the boulder up the hill only for it to have it come down on the other side, because it's going to get messed up again, just like with grass, it's going to grow again. But for at least that moment, you're like, this is nice. It's all tidy. It's all clean. All the carpet is running in this pattern that looks kind of good. And so, that was how I ended each of my school days. And then, I would get out and get in the car and, we'd be on the anywhere from 20 to 45 minute ride home and get up the next day and do it again.